The man of tomorrow is on the case, and Zomia ONE is the place. Of course, actually, the Zomia ONE Underground, specifically where you get your Wednesday Q&A that might actually come out on Wednesday. You know, I recorded the other one on Wednesday, and then my schedule just got so insane. There's so much stuff getting planned, getting set up, and that I'm doing recordings for and remote stuff. And anyway, it's made for a hell of a wild schedule, which you might realize because Sovereign Tech also ended up coming out a little bit later this week. I will eventually have like a more regular schedule for all of these shows, so you can kind of count on when they're going to come out and everything. Things are just starting to, shall we say, stabilize quite a bit more as far as that goes. So anyway, always excited for all of that stuff. Something else I'm a little excited about. What a remarkable little device. So the Mayflash, which if those of you that don't know who Mayflash is just a little company. Could you call it a cottage company? It's kind of a cottage industry, very niche, that they deal in, arcade parts, really, and arcade joysticks and all of this. In fact, I've had a few Mayflash arcade sticks for quite some time. My favorite at the moment, which you can get for really a very low price, and it's a very, very nice and repairable and upgradable and all that joystick, big arcade stick. I mean, you put it on a counter, the whole thing, is the Mayflash Arcade Fight Stick F100. In fact, I have one of my F100s right next to me. I have 3 of them. So anyway, something that I have that I love, and I don't know where all this retro console stuff's going to go. We've talked about this on the Gaming Grid a few times. Of course, one of the shows on Zomia ONE, but we've talked about this here and there. But one of my favorite retro consoles, my top 2 retro consoles that have been released so far, if you listen to the most recent, I think it was the most recent episode of the Gaming Grid, do you know how hard it is, folks, for me to keep track of every show that I do and what I've talked about on each one? Holy hell. Seeing about getting a transcriber actually these days. But anyway, one of my favorites, it's probably my second favorite at this time, is the Neo Geo Mini. And I know, probably nobody has talked about the Neo Geo Mini in months, at least. I mean, probably 6 months. Probably since it came out. Like, I almost wanted to do that. Like, look around on Reddit or something and see, is anybody, like, really addictively playing these fucking things? Because, I mean, I know, back in the 90s, when the Neo Geo was the new hotness, how people were playing that fairly, people that actually could afford it and had it, of course, were playing it fairly nonstop, and the amount of games, I mean, you have 30 some odd games on the Neo Geo Mini. I was actually just rocking mine here a minute ago. And, that should be enough gaming for you if you actually had a Neo Geo back in the day, that would have been gaming for you for a good 3-4 years. I know it doesn't have Windjammers. You can get that elsewhere, but whatever. Anyway, I love this fucking console. It has, and my number one, now this shouldn't surprise anybody also that's listened to the Gaming Grid, my number one favorite retro console at this time is the C64 Mini, the miniature Commodore 64, because that's really more than a console. That whole thing's a goddamn computer, and it's incredible. So can't wait for the full-size one. It's still supposed to be coming this year. I'm very excited for that. Ironically, while I think that the C64 Mini and the Neo Geo Mini are superior offerings and more important and rarer, obviously, offerings than what Nintendo put out. And I'm not knocking the SNES Classic or the NES Classic. They're both very important releases. They started the whole craze. They made everything else possible. But admittedly, I guess just to sidetrack on this for a second, we got great questions to get into this week on your Wednesday Q&A. But remember, the Zomia ONE Underground Q&A is for all shows. It's not just Sovereign Tech anymore. You want it to be all tech questions? Ask them. Anyway, so what I think makes the C64 Mini and the Neo Geo Mini really stand a cut above, we're not even going to talk about the PlayStation Classic, fuck that shit, is that, like, with the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, really all of those games I can play, maybe not so much in 2-player, but really I could play them like on my 3DS, or if you're somebody that has Switch Online or something like that, you're going to be able to rock all those games there. As to where with like the Neo Geo Mini, some of those games, yes, are available like in an SNK anthology or something like that, sure. But to play them, in a very pure fashion, the Neo Geo Mini, I think, was a worthwhile offering. I think it offered a very unique package for all of those games. The C64 Mini, of course, the best, and this is why I think it's number one, is not only did you get like a ton of great games and the ability to, sideload your, new games like Sam's Journey and some of these ones that have come out over the past couple of years that are actually some of the best platformers ever made. Not only could you sideload games, but the software on the C64 Mini is actually the best Commodore 64 emulator in the world, bar none. It's kind of like how the Super Analog NT, right, is the best Super Nintendo out there because the board is custom designed for, running Super Nintendo games. It's not really emulation. It just turns out, not that there aren't a butt ton of Commodore 64 emulators out there for every platform you can imagine. Sure, there are. But the best emulator out there is actually the software on the C64 Mini. So that makes it very worthwhile, right? And that also completely fucking debunks that I get so sick of this argument. The argument that, well, why don't you just do it on a Raspberry Pi? Well, I have plenty of Raspberry Pis, and I love Pi. And, but I don't, if the emulation's not as good, nor is it as convenient, and again, there's more to the package than that. Why the fuck don't I, just use the C64 Mini, especially since those systems really aren't selling out? I haven't even seen where the Neo Geo Mini is selling out. Anyway, I think the C64 Mini has been, it stands at number one between it and the Neo Geo because the C64 Mini people are still talking about. Of course, they're waiting for the full-size version of it. But again, it has a lot of practical uses because new games keep coming out and you can keep adding them onto it and you can play them. The Neo Geo Mini, that is not the case. And I don't know, has anybody even hacked the Neo Geo Mini? That's what I'm saying. Like, it's like this console came out and people just completely forgot about it. And there was like 3 different versions of it. There was the holiday version of it. Maybe I'll see if I can get my hands on that or something. I don't know. But regardless of that, the disadvantage that the Neo Geo Mini and the Commodore 64 Mini have over both the SNES Classic, the NES Classic, the PlayStation Classic, and I'm sure when the Genesis Mini comes out in September of 2019, the disadvantage that Neo Geo and C64 have is their controllers are horrible. I mean, they're fucking horrible controllers. There's no you can't argue for them. They suck. And I tried to get by with like the Neo Geo, and look, and I hate it because months ago when these came out earlier in 2018, I specifically would spend another $25, sometimes even $50, especially for the C64 controller, to get a second controller to be able to do multiplayer. But the controllers are so bad, I feel like I wasted my fucking money. So anyway, Mayflash, who happens to also make, again, cabinet controllers that I've had for years before, well before anyway, before these retro consoles came out, they released... And, I mean, this is just really great of them. They released this little device. It almost looks like a USB flash drive. But it's called the Magic NS. The Mayflash Magic NS. If I think of it, I'll put a link in the show notes. But I was messing with this, and it's so great because, like, the Neo Geo Mini actually has USB-C ports. Weirdest thing in the world. Can you believe how far ahead they're thinking? No, they're not thinking that far ahead. But anyway, but it has USB-C ports. So this normally just has a Type A USB port, the big mail port on it, or not port, but mail adapter on it. But you can put a USB-C adapter on it. Mayflash will have one come with it if you like. And you can program it for what kind of input and output that the controller that you connect to the Magic NS, this little flash drive-like device, which also has a USB female port on it. You can program that for what you want it to work with. And there is a specific setting. I mean, Satan bless Mayflash for this. There's a specific setting for the Neo Geo Mini. They designed it, and where NS comes from, in Magic NS, the NS stands for Nintendo Switch, because they designed it so that you could use arcade sticks with the Nintendo Switch, which of course has tons of classic games, arcade games, and all that on there. Which is great. I don't have a Nintendo Switch right now, but, well, I guess I'm thinking ahead to some degree. But I wanted these, and I've got a couple of them. because there's only 2 ports on the Neo Geo Mini anyway, which I do play, folks. Maybe the rest of the world stopped playing it. I still rock it. Blazing Star, Samurai Showdown, so on. But it works stunningly. I mean, it's such a beautiful little piece of kit. I mean, these things cost about $25 a pop, but very, very versatile. In fact, I think you could probably use it pretty well to connect to an Android phone as well, because Mayflash, their joysticks, you can program to, or you can like flip a little switch on them to work for Android and everything. Just a fantastic little device. Just made the Neo Geo Classic Mini so much more fun, because now you can hook up a real goddamn controller to it. You can actually hook up a PlayStation 2 controller as well, which that goes to, and I think I've said this before. At some point I must have done, and maybe I'll do an updated one for the Gaming Grid or something, but I must have done like the top 8 game controllers of all time. I think somebody asked me into Sovereign Tech years ago about that. And I mean, one of my favorite controllers, of course, is the GameCube controller. But if you get me down to brass tacks, I think the best controller, the most versatile controller, especially now, even more so, even over a decade since they were really relevant. The PlayStation 2 controller, which granted the PlayStation 3 and 4 controller and probably the 5, all just take cues from the PlayStation 2, or really what is the PlayStation 1 DualShock controller, right? But the PlayStation 2 controller, man, that thing just, yeah, I got to give credit where credit's due. That is the ultimate controller. It's amazing what you can still plug it into, like I use a USB adapter to plug them into my C64 Mini, actually, a PlayStation 2 controller. I could use that same USB controller to plug it into this Magic NS and then use it for the Switch, or it does work with the Neo Geo as well. I mean, fantastic. It's such a versatile controller. I mean, and it works so great on all of them. You can't buy, or it's very difficult to buy an official Sony PlayStation 2 controller. I buy the Warrior or Brave Warrior series from Hyperkin, one of my favorite companies out there. Talk about cottage industry. And those are very premium controllers. They feel great, have great weight, great heft to them, and they come in my favorite color of the 90s, that being puke green or toxic green or atomic green, whatever you want to call it. Everything was fucking green back then. But anyway, yeah, awesome stuff. So, me, who says, and I mean this, who says you have to leave the 90s? Who says you have to leave the 80s and 90s? You don't. I mean, you can still rock out your Neo Geo. You can still rock out the C64. I mean, fuck, I can't believe it. I was actually going to theater the other day, and I walk in, and it says right on the marquee, Batman 1989. I don't care if it said Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame and Shazam and all that other horse shit, up in lights. It said Batman 1989, and I rocked it. I was going to say partied like it's 1999, a little Prince reference there for you. But I was partying like it was 1989 with that action. But anyway, it's just remarkable when I think about it too, that not about not leaving the 90s. That's a whole other thing. But it's remarkable when I consider the amount of fucking adapters I have. Even actually just to get the Neo Geo Mini to work, because you have to have like a USB-C adapter for power. You have to have a mini HDMI adapter for it. I mean, and then you have these Mayflash Magic NS adapters, and I have so many adapters. It's so crazy and whatever, but it's just like, part of me just wants to say, can I just plug in, good old classic USB 2.0, USB-A, right, and just let it happen? But whatever. So, okay, why don't we get into some of our questions this week, and then we do have albums of the week, and actually it is albums, a couple of re-releases that I am, am I excited for. And anyway, we'll save it for when we get to album of the week. But let's get into our questions here. And actually, our first question is, holy shit, you know what else is happening right now? As I'm recording this, Google I.O. is going on. We'll get into that maybe a little bit on Sovereign Tech, okay, in either next week or the week after. But like, the fucking notifications, like from Android Police and everything on Twitter. Android Q is going to come with dark mode. it just drives me fucking insane. And Windows 10 is so goddamn horrible because it has this fucking notification shit and it keeps popping it up. I don't know why anybody would do this. What was it recently? So they announced that with the Your Phone app, right? The phone companion app that keeps changing names on Android, that now you can mirror if you have the right version of Windows 10 and you have the right app on your phone and blah, blah, blah. You can mirror notifications from your Android device onto Windows 10. I don't know who the hell would do this. Like, if you're trying to get any goddamn thing done, these notifications will kill you. I mean, like, even though if you set it for, like, what is it, quiet hour or what? Let me look here on Windows 10. What is it here? Let's see. Priority only. You set it for like quiet time with the notifications. That little white box just makes that little change in the bottom right corner. And I mean, you can't help but be drawn to it. And you're like, oh, wait, what the fuck's that? And if you have like clients who are trying to reach you through 20 million different fucking messaging apps, I mean, you just want to go shit yourself. I mean, you want to, I didn't say shoot. I said shit. You want to go shit yourself. And you just, man, there's times where I want to light all this shit on fire. That's why I love playing with these retro consoles, because for fuck's sake, no notifications, no bullshit. You just, you plug it in, you turn it on, and what you get is what you get, and that's how it should goddamn be. Oh, man. Well, this might lead into another question a little bit later on. But, okay, let's get into our first question here. This one has to do a little bit with Zomia ONE itself, so whatever, we'll get it out of the way. Savzu. Love all of the new shows on Zomia ONE. Thank you very much. Reading on. I can't believe how much I get to listen to. I was wondering if you were considering having a wrestling show on the network. I know you're a longtime fan, and I think it'd really give you the opportunity to go all balls to the wall. Thanks for creating the network. Oh, and can we get t-shirts? Okay, so we got two questions there. Kind of three. Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying all the content. I know not everybody listens to every show, nor do you have to, nor you're not required to. I am going to get set up eventually here. I will get set up where there are custom feeds for each show. It's not like the hardest task in the world to do, but it does take a little bit of time, and I got to get all that set up, and I want it done right. So I'll get to that, but just so you know that that's coming. But for right now, I'd really love for everybody. I mean, understand, part of why I'm doing this is I can cross-reference shows all the time on every show that I'm on. Okay. But I want people that say are into, I've gotten so many new listeners into the Hard and Fast podcast, which is a metal show. And I want them to find Sovereign Tech. I want them to find the Gaming Grid. I want them to find everything else. And, maybe we can get them thinking about things, thinking about life. You know what I mean? Anyway, so, all right, so there's that. Let me get into the question here. I was wondering if you were considering having a wrestling show on the network. Yeah, so I like the way you worded that, because am I interested in doing a wrestling show? Not really. I actually tried that on Patreon a little while back where I was reviewing pay-per-views, like Royal Rumble and so on. Nobody really bit at the time on that. Granted, with Zomia ONE, maybe it'd end up being different, but all right, let me answer the question first, and then I'll explain what I'm saying. If somebody approached me, or if I just heard a wrestling podcast that was so goddamn good and I wanted to give them a bigger audience, reach out to the thousands and thousands, I would put them on. Okay, if someone else wants to do a show, dynamite, great. Come on, pitch it to me. And, bbs@sovereigntech.com, tell me what you got in mind. And if you've been going for a while, I know I have I do have some wrestling fans out there. I know that. Okay. I'm more than willing to have a wrestling show. And actually, I would love to have a wrestling show on the network. I really would. Especially one that was into more than the WWE. Like that was into, was it All Elite Pro, right? That like Cody Rhodes is running, or somebody was covering like New Japan Pro, and so on. It was doing some, or even like Ring of Honor, that was doing some of the, I don't want to say smaller, but doing some of the other promotions, because I don't want to insult them. Especially if there's a wrestling show doing the other promotions, I would love to have them on board. And if someone else was in charge of it and they wanted me to be on, I would be on. I'd be honored to be on. I mean, I can certainly talk wrestling, but look, you know what? Ironically, actually, I'm just looking in the mirror here. If there's a mirror in front of me, I'm wearing a D-Generation X shirt right now. Suck it. Woo. I mean, so it's not like I don't love wrestling. I do. It's just today in the WWE, and the WWE specifically, and I'm not going to do a show about like NXT or whatever. I know I could. But today with the WWE, there's cool stuff happening. Like the women's division is amazing, and I totally understand that. Charlotte Flair is great. And of course, the man, those that are watching know exactly who I'm talking about, Big Becky. I'm not that passionate about the product that the WWE is putting out right now. I'm way more interested in what all Elite Pro's doing, or I've always loved New Japan Pro. I'd be happy to come on and talk about it, especially if it was a show that was talking about like Attitude Era wrestling history, like 90s, and basically from like, if somebody wanted me to come on and talk about, well, really from like 83, or should I say, well, if you want to do like a good decade on it, if you did from like 93 to 03 or like 94 to 04, I would happily talk about that era of wrestling. Like I know it. In fact, I don't just know it, like I can quote a ton of the shows and everything from that. I'm obsessed, with that era. And that's what's called the Attitude Era. I'd be happy to talk about that. Talk some 80s wrestling. Yeah, I could talk, from WrestleMania 3 up, I could talk about pretty easily. I could talk about some of the past stuff too, because I'm also a bit of a wrestling historian as far as that goes. So I'm not opposed to it. I'd be a part of it if people wanted me to, but it's not something that I would feel comfortable taking lead on, because I just don't have the passion for the WWE anyway. And I don't really have the time to like watch New Japan Pro or All Elite or any of these other ones religiously as I think they should be done if somebody's going to do a podcast about it, because I'm not just going to let somebody come on that's going to bullshit about it. Like the reason I let Rob, or why I not just let, I want, the reason I want Rob, my co-host Rob on the Rob and Freebeard on, like say, on Sovereign Trek or on TIE Fighter Renegades, is because the guy is as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable than me in these areas. And he is a full on genre aficionado. He's top notch, knows his shit, and he's fucking passionate about it, just like me. And so of course I want that kind of, person on there. But, anybody that's going to be half-assing it or just wants to like randomly talk about it, nah. You can if your show's about something else and it's just something that comes up, sure. But yeah, you gotta be like authoritative in what you're saying, as far as like topics like that go. So yeah, I'm not opposed to having a wrestling show on the network. In fact, I'm fully supportive of it. I would love if it's a show that talked about wrestling other than WWE, but even if it were WWE, again, it'd have to be people that are just like watching that shit like nonstop and are like even commentating on the WWE network and all this stuff. And also, I'm happy to be a guest on it, but I would not take lead. I love wrestling. I really do. And there's a lot of great things to talk about, especially with wrestling's history. Incredible things to talk about that are fun to talk about, and to learn from. And I mean that, like really learn from. But as far as, me doing a show on it, nah, that's not going to happen because I can't really stand to watch modern WWE. So anyway, I'm still a fan. I have my NWO belt right here. Tap the belt. Woo! There it is. Podcast champion, baby. Obviously I love it, so I'm not knocking it, but yeah, that's my thought on it. Now, to the other question here, can we get t-shirts? And I guess you mean for the network, since that question came right after saying thanks for creating the network. Zomia ONE t-shirts, yeah, another thing where I just got to have the time to put those together, and I'd like them to be something special. A lot of the stuff I'm taking, a lot of very, very, like a lot of the interviews and everything that I've been doing lately, I want all of these things to be really well put together, and I just want it to be something very special and something that no one else is like really delivering out there. That's important to me, that I do it that way. So, and that goes for merchandise. I don't want just some shitty t-shirts out there. Okay. I want something that's really cool and that you're going to end up loving and happy to wear. So anyway, yeah, that will be coming. There will be a Zomia One store at some point, and I'll link to it from ZomiaOne.com and all this. And that might happen sooner rather than later. But, yeah, so there's to answer your question on that. Okay, so let's get into another question here. This is kind of a biggie. Tech question. So, hey, Stallion, you mentioned that you had a deeper topic, quote unquote, to get into around the convenience of smartphones. I understand your anti-privacy position on smartphones, but I admit I love mine and really can't imagine my life without it. I don't think you're alone. Just Stallion breaking in. I don't think you're alone in that at all. I'd be curious to hear more on what your deeper topic, quote unquote, was about. Thanks for your rocking content as always, and love the Hard and Fast podcasts especially. Woo, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, a lot of people, like I said, I think I said this on some other show. The Hard and Fast podcast has easily been the number 2 show on the network. And I have gotten a lot of new followers. And it's pretty clear it's from that because like I can see, in their description and everything that they're really into metal. So I assume that that's how they ended up there, which great, fucking dynamite. Okay. So to get to this deeper topic, I did have a deeper topic that I was kind of hinting at that I didn't want to get into because there's so many questions I wanted to cover in the Zomia ONE Underground Q&A last week. Yeah. So what brought this on is recently for stuff that really has to do with the network. And I mean it. I've had to do a good amount of travel. And also, I mean, like, you're getting tickets right and left. I have people that are like sending me things, very kindly for free to check out and review, say before I do an interview with, some literal rock star, which I can't believe I'm saying that, but anyway, go see them in, we need you to see them in concert. We need you to go do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Or if you're just, looking for shows, seeing what's coming up and what's going on. Now so here's a few things. I used to, years ago, and we're talking over, let's say over a decade ago. I used to go to concerts all the time, go to conventions all the time, was flying everywhere. I mean, it was an insane schedule. Fortunately, I was very young, but I mean, I was just going nonstop. Now I remember the process, you had to call, literally you had to call Ticketmaster, you understand, on a landline. Basically. I mean, you wouldn't want to use a cell phone because you didn't know if you're going to get through, and you had to try and get tickets as quickly as you can and everything. I mean, and then when you got the tickets would get mailed to you. Hopefully you'd be home to get that in the mail. You couldn't even print it out. They wouldn't even email it to you at the time. You were carrying around so many different papers to go to different events and to set this up and blah, blah, blah. And, all these different things that you used to have to carry around with you or that you had to make sure that you had and just weren't delivered to you in the most convenient way, which at the time still would have been, because laptops are still a thing. I mean, I've had laptops for a very long time. I didn't consider them viable until netbooks became a thing, until Asus, came out with their ePC. That's the name of it. That 7-inch one too, not even the 9-inch. But, I mean, getting it an email would have been great. And, or the ability to have camera. I mean, well, let's be clear here. To scan all these QR codes for all these tickets, you have cameras everywhere. So even at the movie theater, I was just telling you earlier, went to go see Batman. Now they don't even you can get a ticket, but you can buy it all ahead of time and you just stick your phone underneath the scanner and it scans the QR code. And hell, they even text you the QR code. You don't even have to have the app. They're going to make sure you get your QR code. And you just put it under there and boop. And you don't even need multiple QR codes. The one QR, which of course makes sense. I mean, I get it. This is all very basic and makes sense based on the infrastructure we have today. But, you just put it underneath and boop, there's a ticket for 2, right? Or however many you're going with. But I remember, just how much of a pain in the ass to try and get tickets and all the different things you had to do to get all this stuff set up. And now, just from your smartphone, and it's infinitely through through the app for whatever you're trying to go through. It is admittedly infinitely easier to just interact with the app than it is even the website. Okay. And if, you're setting up like Google Pay and you have PayPal attached to that, or if you're just using PayPal or whatever, you don't even have to put in your credit card info. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You rock booking.com, right? Hard and Fast podcast listeners, you know about that. You rock booking.com. You got that set up, and you have, you go through Ticketmaster through the or through the app, and you can just search and boom, and you get to pick your tickets. And right there is, the layout of the stadium and everything. And, or you're going to go see a movie, you put on the Atom app and whatever, and boom, there's everything. And it all gets sent to you either in your email or it's right there on the app. You just click on your profile, boom, you have however many apps on your phone. But holy shit, you're doing everything right from your smartphone. And this, I know I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. Okay, but I brought this up to say that, like, it is incredible how much you can do and how it all just organizes itself right on that little fucking device. Hell, parking? Yep, parking, that's just another ticket that you save into GPay, and then you can just hold it up to the scanner, when you go to Boston or whatever. You set up your reservation right through the Google search app, to go eat at the Hard Rock Cafe. You do all of this, and it's all done, and it's all set up right there. And then, hell, if you have Google Assistant set up, it's probably telling you about when every single one of these events are going to come up. Because I think we talked about this on Sovereign Tech, how Google Assistant actually reads what's on your screen so that it's able to do that. But everything's all right there, all on that one little 5 to 6 inch device. And then to even pay for things, right? Just to pay for things like when you go to the events or when you're there, you have GPay set up. You just unlock your phone and you hold it up to the pad. You don't even have to break out your credit card or your debit card, and boom, it's paid for. You want to communicate with other people that you're at the event. Say, I don't know, you split off somehow or whatever, and you're communicating right there. Hell, hopefully using Signal, but whatever you're using, you do it all right there, and just everything is right there. Your entire interaction in almost any possible way of doing something in this world is right on that fucking device. And then just consider, say you're driving down there, or you're on an airplane and you want to listen to an audiobook. Oh, there's your Audible app, or you're running your Plex, right? Or whatever streaming service you're using, and you're streaming it right off of there, and you have people walking around like they've never taken headphones off. And other than maybe typing something out like really long form, what other device do you need? And even that, you don't even necessarily need the laptop, right? You can just hook up a Bluetooth keyboard to the damn thing. You hook up anything with it via Bluetooth. It's insane. It is so goddamn convenient. And even I, have to admit it. And just how so it's convenient. It's incredible. It feels like the future. It's amazing. Okay? Here's where I think the real problems lie, okay, with smartphones themselves. I think there's some truth to that smartphones are inherently like a problem, okay? But let me explain why they are inherently a problem. Here we go. So it's two. One is, all right, all of that's great that you can do all that stuff. Again, like I said, though, you have what allows that infrastructure to work. There's fucking cameras everywhere. So if you're concerned about privacy, the question asker brought up, that he or she, I'm not sure which, is aware that, of my anti-privacy stance. That basically, if you're walking around with a smartphone in your pocket, you have no expectation of privacy unless you toss that thing into a microwave or something like that. Okay. And that's very true. All right. Because everything that block of sensors that smartphone does, and everything that allows that smartphone to do what it does in the world as it is today is anti-privacy and is anti-protecting your data. And yes, it is, that you could get. It's that bad. It requires an inherently non-secure environment for you to exist within when it comes to your digital life. Now, one could argue that is a computer, traditional desktop / laptop, that much better off? It can be. Just like a smartphone could be, you can batten down some of those hatches. But the data collection that all these apps engage in, and the amount of data that you're just fucking spewing everywhere, I mean, you're just like coming on everything by using booking.com. And I don't mean to insult them, but you get my point. By using booking.com, by using, Ticketmaster's app, by using, the Atom app and all these different apps and everything. I mean, it's crazy. It's really, really crazy. And it's far worse than any gift card program that there's ever been, or any rewards program that some store, and every fucking store seems to ask for that, ever did. I mean, and we brought up the concerns around just giving these apps, access to your contacts list. That's a very real problem. But for them to work as conveniently as they do, they very much need that info. But there's could you fix that part somehow by like randomizing your ID and, not being attached to your name, but more being attached to just some kind of like, again, random, anonymous ID number? Yeah, but no one's going to do that, because they like to have the interplay. They like all of that data being collected. And of course there's the powers that be, the corporatist system that we live under that loves having all of that data being collected and able to get that all into one store, which is effectively Android or iOS, depending on which one you're using. But, there's a way to solve that, but that likely is never going to happen, or at least not to where we talked last week about the Librem 5, right? The phone, the Linux phone that Purism is coming out with. That's never going to do everything that we just talked about. It's not. There are trade-offs. As we always say, the 10th law of thermodynamics on sovereign tech, right? There's always the trade-off between security and convenience, always. And privacy is a part of security. When I say security, I like to think that as well. Don't always take me, because anonymity, privacy, security are three different things. They really are. I think that to have real security, you actually need the other two, but whatever, generally when I say security, I usually mean all three, but often there are times where I really only mean security. Like Chrome can beef up its security, but it has nothing to do with anonymity or privacy, not really. But anyway, the Librem 5 is never going to do that, unless somehow, and even if these companies like Ticketmaster releases their apps for somehow, for the Librem 5 phone, or, I don't know, they make a progressive web app or something where you can go to the website and that kind of works. Now, if that happens, maybe things could get a little interesting there. But I don't know how much that's going to work out, because they really, they love collecting as much data about you as they can. And they subsidize what they do around that. So it's not even a good business model for them. I think it's a horrible business model, but for them, it's a good business model. They make a lot of money off of it, of all the data and metadata that they collect off of you. And without that, I don't know that they'd even bother. So I don't see that happening. Okay, where they're going to somehow connect your ID to some like randomized ID. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. Now, outside of that, okay, the other problem with the smartphone is that people just can't put them down. That's ultimately, with a lot of this, that is the real issue here, is that people just cannot put the goddamn things down. And I'm not saying I'm any better. Okay. Like I said, I have clients, I have people that I deal with where, I'm connected, and I have my smartphone with me almost all the time. Now, there's times where I sure as fuck leave it behind. You bet your goddamn ass I do. But the real issue here is that people just can't put the fucking thing down. Even the infrastructure issues. Those are there. And like I said, to some degree, they're going to be there even if we just lived in a laptop only world. But even the infrastructure issues aren't as big of a problem as people just can't put the phone down and they can't leave it behind. But ironically, the convenience factor of a lot of this actually requires you to have it with you at all times, right? Because you're using it to pay for things, you're using it to get your ticket scanned, you're using it to get on your airplane, you're using it to get in your car, you're using it, whatever the fuck you're doing with it. So, but that's one of the major issues here. But it is, at the same time, it is incredible, the wealth of things that you can line up and do and get going, or even order, you could pre-order shit out of your ass and it just shows up at your door. You totally forgot you ever even ordered it, but it was so simple to do on your smartphone that you just had to click one button and GPay took care of it and you did it and whammo, there it is. 2 months or however many months later, it's at your door. It is. It's amazing. Or your bank is totally online. Your bank is totally through an app. You never go to a bank. You never go to this place. You never, everything just gets done in the app. You never even have to leave your house. And then your smartphone's always really with you. But yeah, I mean, I recognize how, just in some ways, the amazing or the ease and the amazing life that having that smartphone with you at all times, really allows for. Like, I get it. I understand why people say, I love my smartphone. I love what I get to do with it. I really understand where you're coming from. Again, it comes at a cost. And all it takes is the very wrong person or persons to come into power. Okay? And I mean, I worry, I'll think really long term. And we don't need to talk about politics. I mean, I know most of my listeners are anarchists, but of whatever persuasion, but we don't need to have to go down politics. That's an easy one, to mention that. Well, when this person comes into power, what happens if they shut off, your ability to connect to the internet with your smartphone, and then all those things you're used to connecting to and to do whatever you want to do aren't available anymore. And yeah, it's totally possible. I mean, we see this even at conventions where like they set up a mini, I mean, it's not a dampening field, but it seems like a dampening field where it doesn't allow the smartphone's cameras to open up. So you can't, like if you're at Comic-Con and you can't record the trailer because there's a signal sent out right there by like telcos or whatever, whatever way that they're implementing it to where it doesn't let you record, with the camera. I mean, that's crazy town, but that's been experimented with. Police have similar abilities. These are things that have been worked on, for years. But if everything you do is through that one device, then, once something shuts down that device, you're fucked. And the point I was going to get to is that, I don't even have to go down, talk politics. To some degree, I think there are a lot of people who, I don't want to say smarter than me, but more interested than me, in certain industries within the tech world, we'll say, okay, who they would be able to raise and be aware of the same concerns and same flags that I raise. And they know the potential malevolent ability of a lot of the infrastructure that, again, something is quote unquote simple, and it's not simple, but something as simple as your smartphone relies upon. They know. I imagine, guys like John Carmack, you could go down the list of them, old school guys who've been developing for PCs for decades and, and all this. I mean, they know where this can go wrong. I think that because they're friends, okay, there are other, Silicon Valley alumni, whatever, from decades past, because their friends are running the show, they feel like, well, but they wouldn't do that. Like the guy, over at Oculus doesn't think that the guy at Google would do anything evil, would do anything malevolent or whatever. I think there's that confidence, but then, and I understand where that comes from, because the basic idea is that a lot of these, older guys in Silicon Valley, they saw these technologies at their nascent stages, and so they have a certain respect for what that technology can do. Well, what about their kids? What about the people that take over these companies 20 years from now? They don't have that same respect. And yeah, I worry. I hate to say that because I feel like I say that a lot, that I worry, but I'm just saying that I am concerned about putting all of our eggs in one basket. I get the convenience. I understand why people love it. Recently, I have interacted with it for various reasons and have relied on my smartphone a little more than usual. And I totally understand why people are just like, oh, fuck yeah, I'll use this and I'll do this and blah, blah, blah. I totally get it. But I think you're setting up, you're creating the smartphone for your life, your personal life becomes a central point of failure. And those of us that are into cryptocurrencies or the cypherpunk movement, that's always been our biggest concern, is the creation or the reliance upon anything that's a central point of failure when it comes to tech. So that, hey, I'm just saying, keep that in mind. Okay, that's even if you're not concerned about the privacy aspects, and let's say you're not, you should be. In my opinion, you absolutely should be. But if you're not, pay attention to, that this is a central point of failure. Like, even again, I listen to my podcasts, my audiobooks, I listen to all of my music, through my smartphone and everything. And it's so fucking convenient. I use my laptop a lot for a lot of that too. But certainly when I'm driving around in the Jeep, I have my smartphone with access to all that. There's days where I want to go back to an iPod. I wish, and really there should be. I would totally buy and I've talked about this before, I'd buy an MP3 player that had like a 4 terabyte hard drive in it. And if that thing was like huge and barely fit in my hand, that'd be okay with me. Like, I would really, really like that. I understand the convenience of, digital files and digital media. I do get the convenience of that. I feel I still want to kind of own my files. So I haven't gone that far. I'm kind of middle of the road between being all about have physical media, but then I'm also not supportive of like Spotify, But anyway, yeah, all of this is to say that we have a real problem, that these things are a central point of failure and no one seems to want to do anything about it. And in fact, the way that everything is lining up, you are being forced to use one of these things. And that should be seen as a very real problem, and does that mean that in the future people got to set up some intentional communities and fucking run off to the woods, and leave the convenience of all of that behind? Maybe. But then is that such a horrible thing? I might argue no. Because, the more, especially like when it comes to, one of the main things people use smartphones for is access to entertainment. That's a major part of almost every technology now, is access to entertainment for the everyday person. Most people aren't really creators. They're generally, they're just consumers, right? They're consuming machines of various entertainment. Modern entertainment, modern TV shows, whatever horseshit Netflix is putting out this week for their cult, whatever Hulu's putting out there, whatever, even CBS. Look, I was even arguing like, oh yeah, well, Star Trek Discovery is good. No, Star Trek Discovery is not good. If you listen to Sovereign Trek, you know my feelings on that. And I can't believe I'm saying something Star Trek isn't good. It's not just not good. It's ridiculous. And point being is that all the great entertainment, I think, has been made. And you can make a copy of that. You can either make physical copies, have it on a hard drive, multiple hard drives to have backups, whatever the fuck you want to do. And so do you need access to the latest and greatest of whatever? No. No, you really don't. So you could run off and have all the entertainment you could ever possibly want. And look, even me, I'm about to be 38 years old in just a few days. Even me, I have not read all of the science fiction classics. In fact, a lot of the science fiction books I have read, I've wanted to read again for decades. Since I was a teenager, I've wanted to read them again, and I haven't had the time. There is so much great shit to take in. If you are into stuff just to be able to talk to other people, then you need to assess why you're into whatever media you're into. That this is... whatever. Now that's another conversation to get into about like why people are into whatever music or books or TV shows or whatever that they're actually into. Anyway, that could end up being a whole other topic. Bottom line, I get it. I understand why you people love smartphones. If you're tired of me, knocking them and saying, get rid of these damn things, throw them into a fire on Sovereign Tech, I am not going to stop saying that. Okay, because people really need to question their relationship with this fucking technology. And, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to reach out to enough people that could turn the tide away from you just doing something as simple as going to the movies requiring a smartphone, or buying a cup of coffee potentially requiring Google Pay or Samsung Pay or Apple Pay or whatever. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to reach enough people to where there will be where a demand for a market alternative would come into play. And because of that, I think it might behoove us to consider how can we build, miniature or parallel societies, parallel communities, parallel civilizations, right, that don't require that. And that's a major direction to really look at. And I'll tell you, step one of that parallel civilization, smartphones. Not there. So anyway, okay, I'll stop on that. And, speaking of everything great already being made, well, let's go into our album of the week. And in fact, this is kind of fitting because while everything great perhaps has been made, a lot of what has been made in the past is now just being remastered, right? In fact, Batman never looked so good when I saw the 89 Batman in theaters. Here we have this week's album of the week. Again, it's actually going to be two. It's a double re-release from one of my favorite bands of all time. In fact, it's some boys from New York, just like me. That being Manowar. Huge fan of Manowar. I have been for a very long time. I know that would shock some people because I have a very strong anti-war stance, but I just appreciate the, no nonsense. What did somebody say earlier? The balls to the wall, kind of like accept, right? The balls to the wall attitude towards metal and just being all about metal and just, badassery and everything that Manowar has had to the point of it being cheesy. We are talking about a band that in the 80s especially would be backstage in the dressing room at, stadiums that were wearing loincloths. They had their swords and everything. I mean, just crazy. It's coming out like literal Vikings. I mean, it was really, I've heard stories from management and everything from back then, and it is incredible. And a band that I would like, Eric Adams, Joy DeMeo. I mean, you guys want to come on the Hard and Fast podcast, you have an absolute open door. Manowar is one of my top bands of all time. There's no one else really quite like them, even though some try. I suppose you could argue a band. What would be one that would kind of sound, or that would have the same attitude as Manowar? Well, something like Sabaton, right? Like maybe Sabaton would be along those lines. But anyway, Manowar is, I mean, it's just, no bones about it. They're supposedly on somewhat of a farewell tour, but I've read interviews recently with Eric Adams where I guess he's not so much on a farewell tour. But end of the month, it's supposed to be May 31st. They are doing two re-releases, and these are just remasters and re-releases of two of their classic albums. Actually, their second and third album, which came after Battle Hymn. Battle Hymns being their first album. But the first one is Into Glory Ride, and that's their second album, but the first one to get re-released. And then the other one getting remastered and re-released is Hail to England, which is technically their third album. These are two albums that I think a lot of people that are really into Manowar today, they might not so much listen to these two, maybe Into Glory Ride. Hail to England isn't always one of the first ones that people think of. I think when they think Manowar, of course, usually people think Kings of Metal, Warriors of the World, and, Louder Than Hell. I mean, albums like that. I started off, I cut my teeth on Manowar with Kings of Metal. I think that album's amazing. But these two are getting re-released because they've been re-released before. They were re-released over a decade ago as silver editions, along with Battle Hymns. That all three were done as silver editions, and they were the only one. They totally skipped over Sign of the Hammer. I'm not sure why. But anyway, years ago, they came out with the silver editions. I bought the physical CDs, I remember, because I was like, oh, I fucking love Manowar. Yeah, I'll get silver editions. And those were remastered at the time. These are now Imperial editions, is what they're called. Now, again, they are actually, and this is important to bring up, because Manowar has also done a gold edition now of Battle Hymns. Again, they did the silver edition over a decade ago. But then, in fact, I think it was 2002. 2002 or 2003, something like that. But anyway, but now they've done a gold edition of Battle Hymns. Here's the thing. That came out a couple of years ago. They completely re-recorded the album. And while I think Battle Hymns sounds pretty good re-recorded, maybe better than the original, some of these out, they also did a re-recording, not remastering. They did a re-recording of Kings of Metal, my favorite Manowar album. And I thought it sounded weaker. and they kind of rearranged the tracks. It's almost a new album, and they even left out some of my favorite stuff. Particularly, they left out Pleasure Slave, which is one of my favorite songs off of that album. I'll go back. I really wish they would just remaster Kings of Metal. I wish they'd remaster Fighting the World. They could remaster all of them and just turn up the volume on them a bit, and I'd be a very happy boy. But anyway, so this is not like Battle Hymns or like Kings of Metal where they did a re-recording. This is literally just going back to the mastering, to the masters, the original tapes, and just bringing them up to a, 21st century sound, shall we say. Even though I thought the silver editions that came out over a decade ago did a fine job of that as well. I definitely hear the improvement here, and particularly with Hail to England, they put in where you hear like the engineer and the producers of the album saying, okay, go to, let's start playing, this song. And you get that before the song actually starts, but then the song just like punches right in. Another interesting thing. So on Into Glory Ride, which is a classic Manowar album, fantastic stuff. On Into Glory Ride, the first song on there, Warlord. Okay, now a lot of people know this, and I know I listened to it a bunch of times too. I was a very young man. Okay, I was young. I was a teenager. Okay, so keep this in perspective. At the beginning of Warlord, there is the sound of a gal getting fucked. And, she's moaning the whole thing. And then it sounds like her parents come into the room. And you're pretty sure it's like Eric Adams talking. He has kind of that New York voice and everything, who's the lead singer for Manowar. And like you hear the mother screaming. It's like, she's only 16, and all this. And yeah, she's 16. Now, is that crazy for metal bands to say that kind of stuff? No. Winger had a song, She's Only 17. Motley Crue had, All in the Name of Rock, right? Off of Girls, 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 where it says, I think it said she's only 15. I mean, like, this is not like Manowar was somehow, I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying that this was a thing. And in the updated version of Warlord, that's off the Imperial edition of Into Glory Ride, which is coming out end of the month, it sounds like they muddled the age to where you can't exactly, you can kind of tell that the mother's saying 16, but then it doesn't exactly sound like she's saying 16. I don't know if they're sweating that now, if they feel bad about it. I have no idea. Okay, but regardless, that's something you might notice right out of the gate with Into Glory Ride. With Hail to England, you notice a lot of things, because again, before they go into each song, there's like a little intro. You're hearing the guy in the engineering room, which I think is cool. That works. But the sound is fantastic. These Imperial editions, I want this for like every Manowar album. They're really phenomenal. Again, they technically don't come out till May 31st, but if I've listened to them, that must tell you something. Like, they're available somewhere to get your hands on. So do check these out. If you're a fan of Manowar, you're really in for a treat. And these albums, especially like Manowar's early albums, were far more about like the more fantastical and like Viking kind of, like fantasy lands and warfare and all that, as to where like Fighting the World and some later albums would get more into like real war, like Fighting the World, of course, they have Carry On, which, is like about Vietnam and some of this other stuff. And anyway, if you have that heavy anti-war stance, you can appreciate where maybe, thinking about it more in a fantasy setting, it's a little more palatable to you. Like, anyway, just putting that out there. But Manowar, the music speaks for itself, and the Imperial editions do a hell of a job of that. So do check those out. Again, so you got two that they're technically coming out May 31st, but you have Into Glory Ride, the Imperial edition, and Hail to England, the Imperial edition. Two albums. One, Into Glory Ride, I think, came out in 83 originally, and Hail to England came out in 84. It's amazing how good they sound today. And the metal is still just totally, totally solid, now in 2019. Like when you put in Hail to England and you listen to Bridge of Death, that song sounds better than it's ever sounded. And it's a very rich sound. I think Hail to England is kind of an ignored Manowar album by a lot of people. With this Imperial edition, can't really ignore it anymore, because you get that 9-minute opus, especially at the end, like Bridge of Death, that I think is just a fantastic track. And Warlord, even with that odd bit of business in the beginning, sounds phenomenal too when she started up Into Glory Ride. So check these albums out. Anyway, that's it for your Zomia One Wednesday Q&A. If you have questions around things that I've brought up in this episode, which is kind of what happened this week from last week's episode, feel free to send them in. Of course, you have the email address, bbs@sovereigntech.com. You can also comment on the sound itself, or on the sound, if you have the Podbean app or whatever, you can comment on it there. But plenty of ways you can even tweet at me if you really want to, and direct message me on Twitter if you prefer that, @SovereignTech, of course. So anyway, that'll wrap it up for your Wednesday Q&A, the first one of May 2019. I will see all of you on the other side.